We're here today with Sam Pfiester. The latest of his books, he actually produced Texas Rhapsody. We've had several premieres of the movie. The movie has been wonderful. It's been well received, and it is a movie based on some characters that we're going to talk about as Sam has actually met those characters, has a great introspection, and has created an awesome story about these characters. These are not real actors. These are real people who shared a part of their life, and it is a wonderful movie, and again, has been well received. So what we want to do today is we want to talk to Sam a little bit about his background, where he's from, how he got into the movie business. If you want to call it the movie business, this is actually more of real life. So Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us where you're from and how you got into this movie business?
Well, I was born and raised same place Paul was, which is Fort Stockton, Texas, west of the Pecos River in the Trans-Pecos, which is a pretty isolated part of the country, part of Texas. In fact, out there when I was growing up, the swimming pool dried up, and the movie theater, picture show we called it, burned. And so all we had for entertainment was the landscape and our own imagination, which kind of creates an interesting creative impulse, particularly to tell stories, because one of the great ways to entertain people when there's nothing else going on is to tell stories, which have been going on since Homo sapiens walked the earth 250,000 years ago. So being from West Texas, then I had this crazy idea. One of my kind of life's mottos is never let ignorance stand in the way of a harebrained idea or a bad investment. So, take a chance. We live in Texas. I think, I think you gotta, if you want to do something, well, don't wait around. Just go ahead and do it. So I had this idea about making a movie. The first movie we made was Blanche in 2017 because my brothers and I had leased a ranch south of Alpine in the Trans-Pecos, in the Davis Mountains for some years. All of our friends out there were getting older. My brothers were getting older, and I had this harebrained idea. Why don't we capture all of our friends and my brothers on the big screen having fun, frozen in time, so that, one day their grandchildren could say, oh, yeah. So I hired this really talented lady called Twyla Labar, who is kind of a one-stop media guru, and wrote the script for the movie Blanche based on a true West Texas story about two guys who got in a bet on how far chickens can fly. There's an underlying theme there, and the underlying theme, as they are in all of my movies, is that as our group had aged out, I looked around, and all of them had had what I call road bumps. So either divorce, death of a spouse, alcoholism. Everybody in the movie had had a problem by the time they were late middle age, but they were all resilient, happy, kind, helpful, really wonderful people. And the road bump had not materially impacted their life. And what it had impacted it, but not their attitude or their desire to help others and move on with their lives. And so this bet about how far chickens can fly was just a kind of a method of showing where people are out there in West Texas and capturing all my friends and my brothers on the big screen. It was such a success, kind of incidentally and accidentally, we put it on Facebook, and it now has been because of the little Facebook ads. We did a few Facebook ads, and it went viral. It's been streamed more than 1.3 million times.
Wonderful.
It's on Amazon Prime, and every time it's streamed, we get a penny. Well, I got to thinking then, nowadays we can make a movie. I can make a movie. If I can make a movie, anyone can make a movie. You just got to dream up the idea and not let ignorance stand in the way of stopping you from doing something. And so wrote another script, which I thought was also based on a true story. And that was during COVID, a little town across the border from Big Bend National Park, Boquis, could not get vaccines. So a couple of people smuggled vaccines into Boquis in the United States to help the little villagers over there. And so I dreamed up this other movie called 10 in Texas, where I got 10 women together to smuggle drugs into Mexico. It's kind of an odd thing these days.
That's right.
A lot of Mexican and cartel people are smuggling drugs in the United States. So to smuggle drugs into Mexico seemed like an interesting kind of variation on the real thing.
Right.
And part of that, when you're in the movie making business, all of a sudden you begin to look at how other movies are made. And on that one, there were a couple of challenges. Number one, if you're in the filmmaking business, you have to do a chase scene because chase scenes are endemic. You can only do them in a movie. So I dreamed up a chase scene, and at the same time, it's pretty easy to do dialogue with two people or even with three people. But I'm a great fan of Julian Fellows, who wrote and produced Downton Abbey, and he would have a dozen people at a dinner table speaking in a way that seemed very natural. From a writer's perspective, that's really difficult. So I thought, well, we'll give it a shot. So we had these 9 women speaking, and it was hard to film, hard to write, but it turned out okay. And then after making that movie, I thought, well, heck, maybe there's another movie out there. And then by these odd circumstances, really 3 different narratives kind of came into play over a period of time. And really, those narratives are what created the inspiration for Texas Rhapsody. And that underlying theme is to remind Americans who we are. We are a nation of immigrants. And without taking political sides, I met people who presented who America, really who we are, from both a humanitarian and a rule of law perspectives. And the 3 people that kind of came together into this movie, one was a legal, legalized American citizen, a Venezuelan, a pianist. He and his sister had been discovered as child prodigies in Caracas at their father's dance club. They were discovered by an American pianist, and they became child prodigies. She played with all the large American symphonies when they were children. Venezuelan, became American citizens, are very pro-American, Italian extract to their grandparents from Italy. And I just happened to bump into Sergio Solani.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to ask you about, how you made the connection with these characters, how that came to play, and then how you were able to incorporate them into the script.
Well, the 3 different narratives were Sergio Solani, the Venezuelan, who's now a naturalized citizen, and Harvey, I won't say his last name because I'm worried what's going on in the U.S. right now, but Harvey and his family, who were illegal when they came here, but they were definitely threatened. Their life was threatened by what's happening in Nicaragua. And then an old friend of mine who I've known for 50 years, and I bumped into him again, and it was an odd convergence of these 3 narratives. And I thought, well, golly, if you want to talk about who America is and who we are, this works. And what particularly happened is Sergio Solani, the pianist, and his wife were in Austin for the premiere of 10 in Texas. And after the movie, he had an experience where some homeless people had accosted him as he was walking to the Capitol, which just made me angry. I thought, there's no excuse for that. And he said, no, wait a second. He said, all my Native American friends, forget what America's about. America is really about security, freedom, and opportunity, and nothing else really matters. And I thought, bingo. So here we have a legal American, a legalized American, one who came here illegally with his family. A very hairy experience to get here, risk life and life savings to come to America. And then we have my old man friend, Hunter Ennis, who sold his production, could do anything he wanted, and he decided as a measure of his freedom, he'd just get back to drilling wells. By the way, this is the only country in the world where individuals can own minerals. And so Hunter Ennis, who's one of the main protagonists in the movie, looked at a map of all the wells that were being drilled horizontally. And the only place that had not been drilled was under the town of Big Spring, the same town in which I met Sergio playing the piano.
Right. And that's what I was going to ask you about Big Spring. How did you end up picking Big Spring? How did that work out that you ended up in Big Spring of all places? Me growing up in West Texas, no, we've got some pretty rough little towns out there, but there's a nice hotel there, kind of an oasis in the desert, and now, big part of the movie.
As an odd convergence in Big Spring, and no one was more surprised about Big Spring than me because it's really not a very pretty town. It's got a refinery. It's got I-10 blasted through it. It's a poor town. It's mainly a two-story town with one 15-story building that was built in the 1920s, the Hotel Settles. A local man, Brent Ryan, purchased that hotel. Brent Ryan had done very, very well, and he purchased that hotel a few years ago for $75,000. And then he renovated it to the tune of $30 million. And it is a very classy, wonderful.
A whole nother movie in itself.
A whole nother movie, that story in itself,
Right.
which started a revitalization process in Big Spring. My wife and I were there because we were looking at every courthouse in Texas, and the Settles Hotel is next to the Howard County Courthouse. Sergio Solani was there because he wanted to get his kids into something real so that they could plant grapes and kind of get back to his youth when he ran through the vineyards of his grandparents in Italy. He bought 300 acres sight unseen off the internet. And he was there at 300 acres adjacent to Big Spring. And he was in Big Spring with his family to show them this new vineyard that he intended to plant.
In Big Spring, Texas.
And when we got there, the families were ready to go home because instead of a place you could grow grapes, it was a San Paulo mesquite patch.
Mhm.
So that's how we met Sergio. Then he told me a story about coming to America and all opportunities, and he looks at America as opportunities. So that was one story. Based in Big Spring, Settles Hotel. The other narrative was my pickup, a white Nissan, is in the movie 10 in Texas. We were shooting 10 in Texas in 2 separate weeks. The second week we were shooting it on my way to West Texas. All my films, by the way, are located in West Texas. On the way to shoot it, I was at a ranch filling up deer feeders, and the pickup wouldn't start. It just wouldn't start. It wasn't a battery. It was one of those things. And so I called a friend who was in church. He said, well, I can't help you, but I know a man that can. And I met this man who is Harvey, who had arrived not many months before with his family from Nicaragua. And he told me about their experience on why they left Nicaragua, why they came to America, and what a really harrowing time they had. He came to America for security. And then, so we have Sergio who came here for opportunity. We have Harvey who came here for security. Both wanted the same thing, they had a better life for their children. And then Hunter Ennis, the old man, and Hunter Ennis, when I bumped into Hunter, I said, what are you doing? Hunter's now 89 years old and can do anything he wants. He said, well, I just want to start drilling wells. And he leased the town of Big Spring, gave everyone in Big Spring, a town of 25,000, at least $1,000 signing bonus. And then now has drilled more than 20 wells under the town. So he drills 8,000 feet this way and 20,000 feet this way. And now every single person in Big Spring, Texas is receiving what I call mailbox money.
Right.
And has really made a difference in their life.
So tell me, Sam, how did you, very diverse stories, yet very connected. How did you bring all those together in a 1 hour and 15-minute movie? How did that seems like a very hard thing to do.
Well, I wanted to write a story. I wanted to remind Americans who we are. And so here we have, a legal American who plays the piano, became a pianist, became a successful lawyer, wanted to kind of get his kids back to reality. Then we have my friend Hunter Ennis, who happens to be drilling wells under the same town where this man and I met when he was playing the piano. And then we have this Nicaragua. So we have three kind of all-American stories. And it's really cool. America is. I mean, we're a country where a man like Hunter Ennis, who started out very humbly, can become a very wealthy, very successful, and very philanthropic American who has made such a huge difference on this whole little town of Big Spring. We have this Venezuelan American, and he looks at America's opportunity. When he saw a San Paulo as a mesquite patch, he asked somebody, "What's that at the end of the field there?" And they said, "Well, it's a pump jack." He said, "What is a pump jack?" Said, well, pretty soon he has on his San Paulo mesquite patch a saltwater disposal well, a battery. He leased 20 acres for a battery. He sold sand for frac sand, and he ended up with a little over a sixth of the minerals, and now they've drilled 7 horizontal wells under his. Wonderful. And so he's made a lot of money. Yes. Out of what he thought was going to be a vineyard. Right. It didn't have a shot of being a vineyard. Right. But he looked at America and said, only in America right. could this happen.
Right. So tell me a little bit about the West Texas connection. So obviously you grew up there. I'm obviously from that area, lived there all my childhood life, and it's a very different place. What makes you mentioned that most of your movies are out there, and you talked a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit more about West Texas and some of the ranches out there. And
Okay. My wife has this theory which I subscribe to, and that is where your foot first touches the ground becomes your inner geography. I've always loved West Texas. A lot of people don't know West Texas. A lot of Texans don't know West Texas because they drive through our hometown, Fort Stockton, to fill up with gas on their way to El Paso and points west, or right. coming the other way to Houston, right. points east. But from Fort Stockton south is the Trans-Pecos, which has a varied and beautiful landscape. And landscape, I wanted to show off in the movies because, in fact, it's an essential character of the movies. Right. So in Blanche, the Davis Mountains are showcased. In Tennessee, Texas, we show off the Chinati Mountains, the Davis Mountains, the Del Norte Mountains, and in Texas Rhapsody, we show off the canyon country between Fort Stockton and Sanderson. So very different landscapes, very beautiful in their own remote way. It's the Chihuahuan Desert, the largest desert in North America. And here's my theory. This is a little digression, is that when our ancestors were moving west, when they were in Pennsylvania in the Northeast, one family for generations could make a living off of 160 acres because of rainfall. So you could clear 160 acres and it was productive enough that you could make a living off rainfall. And if you needed something, you would just go to the village. If you needed your horseshoe or you needed a plow sharpened, you'd go to the village. So it was a whole different kind of a value system. As you moved west, particularly when you left the trees at about the 98th meridian, just about Fort Worth, dryness, the aridity made you spread out. And that caused really two different values that in ways are opposing, but are in existence today. And I call it a frontier consciousness. And that is this: as you spread out, you had to become more self-reliant. You couldn't just go to the village and get your horseshoe. We're so spread out because you can't make a living on 160 acres in the Chihuahuan Desert. One old cow calf takes about 100 acres. You have to have a cow calf too that can walk a pretty good distance between grass and water. At the same time, it makes you self-reliant. It makes you neighborly. So you have to be neighborly because when you need help, you really need help, and it works both ways. So we're both West Texans are self-reliant and neighborly, and because there's not much else to do, you became storytellers. Right. Well, filmmaking is a form of storytelling. Exactly. So I'm just putting narratives together and saying, what do you think?
No, it's interesting that you say that. A lot of people don't know most landowners in other parts of the world call them acres. We call them sections. There's 640 acres in a section, and out there you own 20 sections, you own 100 sections. That's just how it works. And we have a different view on things. And I know here in the central Texas area, deer hunters will have 20 acres to hunt. Well, I was walking ridges and hiking miles. So it's just very different, very diverse. And it is a different survival mode out there, which is wonderful.
And it still exists, this frontier consciousness. If anybody goes west of the Pecos, you'll find the people very friendly, not afraid of strangers. Now in the urban environment, you're kind of afraid to look at somebody passing you on the sidewalk. Well, if you sit down in a restaurant and you're a stranger, somebody will come up to you and say, "Hey, what are you up to? Who are you?" It's a whole different kind of a mindset. And part of it, I think, is because you're so spread out and you live in the landscape, and the landscape is so beautiful, and it's kind of remote, stark, high elevation way. It cools off in the evenings. They have rain clouds. We have a family ranch out in what I call the Greasewood Flats. It takes more than 100 acres for the cow-calf. But we could always see the Davis Mountains with a cloud over the Davis Mountains. And I thought, man, I'd like to have a ranch up there. So we finally leased a ranch and made a movie in the Davis Mountains. But the landscape is essential to our storytelling because I'm a regionalist. I'm from West Texas. I have an inner geography. And some people, it's very interesting, people from all over the world will come there and they will feel like that's their home place.
Wow. Right. And I think it's interesting. You've been able to make use of that area very efficiently. So, without giving too much away in the movie, it really does feel like you're in those areas, even though it's filmed in a relatively small part of West Texas. And you paint a really good picture of kind of the situation, crossing the border, things of that nature. So it was very well done and very efficient.
Well, part of the reason, another reason is in West Texas because we make our movies cheap,
Right.
which means we don't pay that. We don't pay for locations. So I knew ranchers. So the films are located on my friends' ranches, which we didn't pay them for.
Right.
But most of them, I put them in the movies because I say, "Hey, would you like to be in a movie?" And if they say yes, and I say, "Can we use your ranch?" They'll say yes. So it's both a way of kind of maintaining your costs in the movie, but showcasing that beautiful land.
Right.
And West Texas has its own its own beauty, its own character. And we're showing that off. And you can do it, by the way you do it is with a drone. Because if you just have a camera on the ground, you can't get the scale.
Right.
You can't get the whole kind of a visual expansiveness of West Texas. But with the drone you can, and I think our movies do that.
Right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, Sam, thank you very much for your time. Your story is wonderful, your history and background of the things that you brought to us. And I know I've learned a lot about you, and it's been wonderful talking to you. And hopefully there's more to come. Maybe some other scripts out there.
Well, there's another one already kind of forgotten, unfortunately, but I want to just make one other comment. You can put this in where you want. In the first part, the first introduction to Texas Rhapsody, there's a spoken narrative, which those of us my age recognize as the voice of President Ronald Reagan. And it was his last speech as President of the United States. And he talked about immigration and that America is a beacon for freedom and opportunity. And that's what we were showcasing in Texas Rhapsody.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So tell me, where are you headed from here?
Big Spring. You know how far it is?
Sálganse, los de Nicaragua.
¡Vámonos!
That man broke the law.
Nos vienen conmigo.
Without the rule of law, America is just like any other country. I came here legally.
Well, aren't you lucky?
I am lucky.
What do you think? Couple of thousand leases?
It's like a fantasy world here.
It's not their fault. This is a good life. Who wouldn't enjoy it?
You're right. But it's our fault if this is all they know.
¿Águila o rayo?
Águila.
and what's wrong with it. But that man knows exactly what's right with it.
Todo va a estar bien, te lo prometo.
Tienen que estar con nosotros.
Te voy a encontrar. Why are you helping me, man?
Well, because you're sitting in front of me. We're connected.
Thank you.